It's nice to see you all here. My name is Stephen Butler. I'm a clinical psychologist who is also the joint UCL lead for the course and the module lead for core skills, which is what I'm going to speak to you about today. Can I just get a sense where people are from, which actually has a lot of relevance to core skills, as I'll get into. What services are you from? Sorry, I don't know if there's a master list before you all came today, but can you tell me very briefly? I have 20 minutes and Tash actually finished 4 minutes early, so I have 24 minutes. Sorry, so I can take a little bit of extra time. What sort of?
I work as a wellbeing coordinator in school, primary school in Hackney, and I also work as a youth worker, lead youth worker.
Yeah. Others?
Westminster Cams.
Westminster Cams, okay. What profession or what kind of work do you do there?
I'm the service manager.
Service manager, okay. Others? Maybe a few more, and then I can move on. Yeah.
Stockton Canton,
Okay.
so I work across two teams. It's got
Right.
all families in local authority Cantons and also Canton adolescents and intensive support services.
Okay.
I'm a clinical nurse specialist in Great Ormond Street Hospital for gastroenterology.
Wonderful. And yourself?
I'm from Walton Forest Camps,
Oh,
and
okay.
this is I'm a family therapist, and I do the CYP IAPT.
Yeah.
I'm interested to do AST and learning.
Okay, so you're back for another training.
Hope so.
I do remember.
Miss you, of
Yes.
course.
I mean, the reason I ask is because I'm speaking about core skills, which is, you might say, a bit of an overarching general module that interacts with the other courses, right? And one of the things we've found over the years is people are from a wide kind of diversity of settings, with a wide diversity of trainings, and in some sense, core skills is an attempt to help socialize or work with people to develop some competencies that cut across the modules, some skills, some ways of thinking about work with child and young people that are extremely useful and that you need in some sense to apply more specific work well, for example, to apply a specific form of therapy. And I'm just going to, sorry, is it okay if I stand so I can see? Oh yeah, that's just a team. I'll get to that in a sec. So I mean, so that's really the whole point of the module. And it's not an easy thing to do because the core skills module works with everybody. So I think this year we have 115 or something like that, right? So there's been a real development over time. So now we've kind of integrated core skills thinking and training into the modalities in a much more specific kind of way, which I'll get to in a sec. This is the team. I think instead of going through everybody's name, the thing committed, enthusiastic and passionate, and really interested in helping develop evidence-based practice in a way that fits with people. Nobody here, there's no ivory tower academics in the program at all. I think that's across the whole program. You know, everybody has work experience working with children and families. So everybody is really enthusiastic about applying knowledge and scientific evidence to improving the ways we work with young people. I think that's the kind of bottom line. And those are people who are enthusiastic in doing that. In addition to wonderful administrative support, as I just mentioned, 115 people, you can imagine that you really have to have people on the ball when it comes to organization. So core skills, there's fundamental elements that are woven throughout the work of all the individual modules. There's a small amount of intermodule teaching, but most done within the modules now. And that kind of jargon will make sense. It means there's some general core skills teaching first at the beginning, which we'll talk about. And then a lot of it has been shifted into making these principles. For example, applying this scientific evidence to specific therapeutic modalities in terms of what we know about them, how effective they are, why are they maybe only partly effective, how do you assess more complex populations such as the under 5 or kids with autistic spectrum and learning difficulties, right there. So there's an interaction between these general kind of skills and the modules more and more. And then there's 4 assignments, which everybody always wants to know about. And I kind of won't go in a linear way. I'll just use my 20 minutes and kind of touch on all the slides. But the assignments are something that over time we've learned a lot about as well, which is how to provide support. The diversity of intake is not just in terms of experiences, training, profession, it's also in terms of academic experiences and confidence as well. And we found that the assignments, which create havoc, whether you're in a doctoral program, in a more general training program, I've learned this working at UCL as well. People really get anxious about them. And so they've created a bit of tension on the course in terms of, not tension, but a bit of stress in learning how do we support students. So I'm saying this in roundabout way of saying we provide a lot of support for that. And part of what we do in core skills and in the other modules is have assignment workshops where we really go step by step through these things and help people understand what the demands of the assignment are and how to meet them. So we have 4 assignments a year in a module. Now, at this point, this is kind of the way it looks. Unless I haven't got the memo yet, I don't think there's any new modules coming on board this year. Guy, I haven't missed a memo that there's a new module coming on board.
Counselling, isn't there?
Oh, counselling isn't there.
Core skills, they don't do core skills.
Yeah, sorry, there's an extra module, counselling, but it's a more discrete certificate course, so we don't interact with it. So these are the different modules we interact with. Under 5s, which is, I think, short term for working with parents and young people. Would that be okay? ASDLD I mentioned, which again is kind of a short form for young people or children and adolescents with autistic spectrum disorders and learning difficulties. And then specific family practices. Is that how we look at it now? It's really a group of family practices, isn't it? In terms of working with people, for example, with chronic problems or eating disorders. And the idea that, again, it's a child and family training. You want to look at the individual level, the parent-child level, and the family level, right? And so we really represent that. And I think some of the exciting bit, too, is people from all diverse settings bring in different issues. For example, working in schools, we've had more and more interaction with professionals who are employed in schools, which bring in, again, issues relevant to core skills, which is, for example, how do you assess somebody whose primary problems are in the school as opposed to at home. So that's that. Now there'll be some repetition, I think, from what Tash, that's it, okay. So I thought I would just talk about the basic teaching structure, hopefully on the main things that would be important for you to know. Initially, we have a whole large group teaching at the beginning of the course, right? So we have kind of immunization input, a little bit of intense teaching in core skills. To look at the framework of developmental psychopathology, some basic principles and constructs of evidence-based practice. There's a lot of teaching or a substantial bit on using outcome measures or standardized measures to sharpen assessments and chart treatment outcomes and change over time. And then the relevance of science and research to clinical practice. That's broadly speaking what we cover. Has anybody heard of developmental psychopathology, the framework? I know you have, Colin. Anybody? No? Okay. You have, right? Now, honestly, are you glad that you've heard of it now?
Yeah, it's interesting again to put it in that framework because we touched base and we had a lecture and some guest lecturers came, but it's interesting to go back and look at it again.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get turned off by the term psychopathology, which people often do. But you know, it's really the framework that's allowed us to have CYP IAPT. That would be my viewpoint. Without developmental psychopathology, we wouldn't be here. Most of the people, for example, at UCL and the Anna Freud Center, who are doing research with children and families are developmental psychopathologists. It's a simple risk protective model. What are the risks or strengths? What are the risks or vulnerabilities? What are the strengths or protective factors that come together over time to influence how children turn out? And it's very systemic. So it looks at individual, for example, neurocognitive factors in the case of kids with learning disabilities. That may be especially important, but it also looks at environmental factors, for example, in the case of antisocial behavior, which seem to be primary. So it looks at parent-child interactions, family interactions, and individual risks. So that's the idea. It's a nice systemic framework that, as you can see, cuts across, right, the different specific modules, and will be contextualized a little bit differently in each module, and that's why we're going towards more integration. For example, earlier we had questions about, well, how do you assess a parent? The measures don't seem, and I'll get into outcomes in a second, but the measures don't seem to really assess parents properly. So we had this whole discussion, how do we address that? Now with an under 5s module, it's much more of a vibrant issue, right, which is really how do you understand? And I think having, obviously, Emily on board in the under 5s module enriches the core skills teaching as well, and vice versa. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know, the general competencies of what are you looking at? What kind of, you know, everybody says attachment, what the hell does that mean? What are you actually looking at in terms of the relationship between a parent and a baby, an infant? That will affect their development. How does that interact with, for example, their relationships outside the family? Simple things like that. We have a broad framework to help understand those issues. let's see, so we have that framework, we have the kind of basic constructs of evidence-based practice. What we found is really quite interesting. People like science more than we thought. So when we get more scientific, actually people give us better feedback than when we're less scientific. So we've really brought in some teaching to look at why does science matter, essentially, to the work we do. And then this whole focus on outcomes. And after this initial kind of, it's not really all that intensive, but it's focused on core skills. I think it's 6 sessions, something like that. Then they become integrated into modalities, specifically teaching in smaller groups. So kind of, I think there's 3 modalities in each for next year. All right, so I think now, I'm just going through some of the basic things that I mentioned before. So the first is formulation. And again, the idea is how you use this model to formulate, and how is it integrated over time with the framework specific to your modality. I gave an example before to about under 5. Let's take a different example. Let's take IPTA. Is anybody interested in IPTA in the room? No. What other modules are you interested in? So the examples make sense. Okay, I've already given 1 or 2. CBT, anybody? A few. I mean, CBT is always good. There's usually some general interest, right? The CBT literature is really quite interesting. If you look at it from a developmental psychopathology point of view, you'd like to look at, well, for what kids, for example, is it particularly effective? Maybe it's effective in the old-fashioned way for kids who have access to stronger environments, more capacity to use material that has to do with thoughts and feelings, that kind of thing, right? And in fact, some of the CBT literature, from my point of view, is starting to wobble. There's less clarity just how effective it is for some problems. For example, adolescent depression would be one of them. So developmental psychopathology would help you evaluate that evidence. Why is that the case? What's happening in adolescence that IPTA, for example, say, may address well, what might not be being addressed properly, that leaves us with kind of some moderate or okay effects of the intervention. Does that make sense to me? So that's the kind of thinking framework for that. And then it's kind of ensures, again, that competencies in integrated formulation grounded in the systemic context that condition our work are part of the teaching. That's a lot of jargon, but it essentially means that I think no matter what we're doing from the point of view of that framework, you're dealing with a system inherently. And people usually don't need any convincing of that, because you all know that from doing the work. Okay, I kind of, it's a bit of a mishmash, because I've built on somebody else's presentation. And this kind of has to do with the whole, there's formulation, so there's these frameworks for understanding, and then there's the whole idea of what does the evidence say, right? So part of the core skills module is obviously to develop both conceptual ways of thinking about and practices that are evidence-based, which I think Tash mentioned is not a cookbook, right? It's not how to apply specific ingredients per se, but there's certain principles that cut across it. Using the research, capitalizing on your clinical expertise, and involving the young person. And I think the idea is that you become, through core skills, becoming familiar with principles and developing knowledge base that supports evidence-based practice with young people should enhance and enrich your practice and contextualize your modality. Now again, to make that kind of in plain English, you might say, right? Keeping with depression, I was teaching on anxiety the other day to educational psychologists. I kind of am close by and I know enough about it. It's not really my specialty, but I seem to go back year and year, even though I'm getting a bit more reluctant. Am I the right person for it? But they say we want a general framework. We don't want kind of just a CBT specific, for example, which is a well-known framework for anxiety. We want to kind of get the students familiar in general with the terrain, right? And here, I mean, there's some similarity to that, in that, again, you want to be able to contextualize your practice to some basic ideas and basic principles that would influence how you apply things. For example, interviewing, which I haven't done a lot, but children with autistic spectrum disorder vulnerabilities is different, I would think, from interviewing a 10-year-old child with no real, in quotes, problems or psychopathology that are severe or serious, but are there because they're struggling with environmental issues, right? Now, if they're struggling with environmental issues, for example, around conflict with their parents, there are, again, specific ways one would want to interview around that. I'm making sense to people. So I think there is that. And then, as I mentioned, you know, just knowing what the key findings and what the key markers are in any field. For example, in antisocial behavior, which I have kind of been involved in quite a lot, I'm sometimes surprised in antisocial behavior there's so much research knowledge. We know that the most severe kids are the kids with the problems that develop early, right? That come before, say, 10 years of age. That's why the criteria is in DSM. That involve both aggressive and non-aggressive forms of problems. So you can see how that would start to influence your assessments, right? You want to know, when did the problem start, obviously? What was the age of onset? How pervasive are their antisocial problems? We know they're aggressive, but how much are they lying? Are they stealing? Are they getting their little brother to steal for them? So you might say that there's some really key markers in each of these areas that it would be good to know about to improve practice generally across England. I think it's getting back to Tash's map, right? In other words, in this day and age, you'd want people to know about the difference between early onset and late onset antisocial behavior, between non-aggressive and aggressive antisocial behavior, which is enshrined now in the DSM, and which is just such a traditional and stable finding you need to know about. Another might be, you know, coercive parent interactions, which again, cut broadly across our work, which is that more harsh critical parenting really is pernicious in terms of negative outcomes. So those are the kinds of things that we do. Now to get a bit out of the conceptual bit, how am I doing for time? I'm doing okay. Routine use of measures. Are any of you using measures now in your practice, in a routine way? Some, okay. I mean, do any of you, and you can say it's okay, I mean, I'm being filmed, I guess, is that what you said? I was surprised at being in.
You can cut stuff.
Nobody elicited my consent, they told me at the last moment, etc., etc. But anyways, historically, I think the whole idea of using measures was much more problematic. I think people had more negative beliefs and expectations about the potential harmful effects for young people and parents. Does that make sense to people? I think that's changed quite a lot over the years. We've seen that. And I think one of the factors that has really helped with that, I think, has been the young people themselves who have given reasonably positive feedback most of the time about that, how using measures enhances their mental health assessment and treatment. So I think now we get less of there's less of a belief system that these are harmful. It's more of a focus on how do we use them usefully, productively, with validity. And so the core skills teaching really looks at that, and the person who does that is really skilled and passionate about it, and I think that's a wonderful job. So it's about looking at routine outcome measures, making them clinically useful in terms of improving assessment, improving outcomes in terms of treatment, enhancing supervision. That's where I think things could go a little bit, we could probably have a bit more concerted effort, although I'm a bit disconnected now from the supervision course, which I think is probably progressively doing that. Because the whole point of using outcomes, of course, is to identify cases going well, that aren't, and that are in a gray area, and this is obviously a major task of supervision. So it's not just using them at the individual level, but integrating them into the system you're working, right? Yeah, and just the idea that, you know, building on what Tash is saying, evaluating services, that's kind of the context we're in. But also, like I said, I think really heartening, consistent feedback from young people in care, I think, are helpful. And importantly, because I think this is what people used to be, well, to a degree, are reluctant sometimes, interfere with building the therapeutic alliance, right? Young people don't really say that, or adversely affect their experience of being in the room with you. No, they don't say it doesn't do that either. If it's done poorly, obviously it will, but anything done poorly would, wouldn't it? In general, they say these things are useful. So we focus on that quite a bit. I wasn't sure about throwing this in, but I thought I would, just again to give you an idea. From a core skills point of view, it's a question of how do you use measures usefully, which involves, for example, how regularly you do them. Who do you give them to? You know what I mean? Who do you give them to? Obviously, a 2-year-old child, it doesn't make sense. The mother, obviously the father. The mother and father may disagree. How do you understand that, right? Young antisocial kids, yeah. The young person, yes. The parents. Now, given its antisocial behavior, will they be honest in reporting? They tend to be. There's some idea that actually reporting on observable behavioral problems, you get more reliability with parents than reporting on internal emotional experiences. So those are some of the kinds of issues that would contextualize, clinical issues, that would contextualize the idea of using them usefully in your clinical work. Am I making sense to people? And that, I think this is one of the nice things I like about CYP IAPT. In fact, one of the things I probably like most about it is that I think this whole measures thing was done quite well. There is some research now in the States primarily suggesting that just using outcome measures to evaluate progress and involving young people and parents in that way improves outcomes, regardless of whether it's CBT, IPT, FFT, regardless, right? So there's this idea, obviously you still want perhaps a specific modality with mechanisms to help improve change, right? Ways of helping change for that problem. But the idea is that if you talk with people and keep abreast with them and involve them in discussions about how they're doing in therapy and measure that, that helps in and of itself. And in CYP IAPT, there's a combination of those type of measures, which clinicians and people tend to like, and the more symptom-based ones, which people don't like as much, but which are obviously important as well. So we teach both about the process measures, so people's experiences, goal setting, how they're feeling about treatment, but also content. How is their depression doing from week to week or from month to month? And I think I'll leave it at that because I don't want to take too much more time. That, again, David kind of put in this slide to give you, I think, an idea of the specific measures, but I think if you end up in core skills, you will no doubt get a slide like this at the teaching, so I'll probably wait until then. But it illustrates what I mentioned. Some of them are trackers in terms of input from young people and parents around goal setting, experience, and treatment. Some are symptom-based, as you can see. I think there may be the RCADs, the STQ in there, for example, the ones that you're aware of. I think I just have a few more left. So the third pillar is collaboration and participation. Again, I've really been impressed by the huge amount of development in this area. I mean, not this year or last year, but the years previously, I used to go out more into the services with Alex, who was the program person, or one of the program people, and we used to, with Duncan as well, we used to interview services, not so much interview, but we get everybody in a room to evaluate how are the services being transformed. And I think one of the cardinal things we found is that a lot of services were really creative and on the cutting edge of involving young people in their services. Something we couldn't predict because every service is different ideas. For example, maybe around, say, if they're seeing a lot of depressed adolescents who are self-harming, there's an idea for involving young people in new creative ways that we wouldn't necessarily think of. But we want to kind of really develop this idea of collaboration and participation. And I think both are happening. There's been a huge development in terms of CYP IAPT itself, but I think a really significant development across a lot of services. We have a participation assignment, our own little way of doing this, which is to have you interview young people about their experience of services. And we also had initially these generic panels of people and parents talking about their experiences in front of, say, 40 or 50 of you, half and half the group. But now I think it's improved. So now we're going towards each modality interviewing young people or children or carers about their experience of being involved, for example, in services related to under 5s, of receiving IPTA. And I think this is happening, you know, it's a developmental progression. We've just moved into this, integrating core skills. This is a great example of that, integrating this principle of participation into the modality teaching more. The modalities now are interviewing people more than they did last year and the year before, or the last few years, on what's your experience of having a family treatment. So I think this is, again, a really nice development.